This special presentation was produced in high definition by WEDU, Tampa, St. Petersburg, Sarasota.
To do the right thing. Not only what's good for us, but good for others who are less fortunate than us. It's a worthy goal, but not always easy to do. After all, we've got careers, families, and plenty of personal obligations. But imagine if you set your moral compass on doing the right thing and then spent your career influencing others to do the same. You're about to meet a Tampa attorney who spent the past 60 years getting attorneys in Florida, the U.S., and around the world to do the right thing.
There's no one exactly like you. No one has the same financial goals or cares about the same people. That's why Raymond James Financial Advisors have the independence to offer unbiased advice that's right for you. And it's why we pioneered the idea of financial planning. You might say we're just as unique as you are. Raymond James, individual solutions from independent advisors.
According to the law, we all have equal access to justice in America. In reality, that's not how it always works. Early in his career, Tampa attorney William Reece Smith Jr. decided that access to justice shouldn't only be for those who could afford it. Over the course of more than half a century, he led the Florida Bar, the American Bar, and the International Bar Associations and convinced lawyers to provide legal services to millions of indigent people. He did this and more while building one of the most prominent law firms in Florida. Reece, welcome to the Suncoast Business Forum.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Glad to be here.
Now, your legal practice spanned 60 years. You were involved in all the bar associations we just mentioned. How have you seen the practice of law change?
Enormously. And unfortunately, I think we moved further away from being a group of professionals to businessmen, and thereby set aside some of the aspirations that lawyers have long had and held. We keep working to get it straight, but it's more and more difficult.
Tell us about growing up in Plant City. It was during the Depression. You were going to school, you were working, and you were playing sports. Tell us about life at that time.
I can remember when I was in maybe high school, junior high perhaps, going to the pool room in Plant City, which was verboten because they sold beer. But I slipped down the back alley because I liked to be with the boys and shoot pool. I told my father about that some years later when I was grown, married, and left home. And he smiled and said, "Oh, I knew you were there, Bud. The man who runs the pool room called me every time you got there and said, 'Mr. Smith, Reece is here. Don't worry, I'll look after him.'" And that was what growing up in Plant City was like in that era. Most all of us were involved in one or more kinds of sports. In my case, I played football and basketball and did a little bit of track.
Did you work while you were in high school?
Yes, I did some. My first job I can remember was working for the Great Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company grocery store, the A&P as we called it. And I was, my job was in the back room sacking potatoes. Got 12 cents an hour for that job. And later on I had other jobs. I delivered newspapers, both for the Tampa Tribune and what was then called the Tampa Daily Times, which was the afternoon newspaper.
While you were in high school, World War II broke out, and you got involved in the military while you were in high school. Am I right?
Yes. I graduated from high school in 1943, and the war was going on at that time. And they called all the boys who were seniors to come to a meeting. We were told if we wanted to be in the Army program, take a yellow card. If they want to be in the Navy program, take a white card. I had not seen much salt water in my day other than when we'd go to the beach over around Clearwater. And I felt much more comfortable with the idea of being in the Army. But when they passed the cards around and got to me, there were no yellow cards left. And therefore I had to take a white card, which I did, filled it out, and I was one of the ones selected to participate in what the Navy then called the V-12 program. That sent me to Georgia Tech, and then after some more exams, I was moved to Naval ROTC at the University of South Carolina. I spent a lot of my war in studies in school, one place or another. I can remember being asked by somebody, "How long you been in the Navy, sailor?" And the response was, "3 semesters, sir."
Now, you entered law school at University of Florida in 1947, and in a book called The Greatest Generation, they write about your peers who came back, went to school, and spent their entire careers, both professionally but serving the greater community.
I think the reason for that was that we were sensitive, or they were sensitive, to the time that's been lost while in the service, that they wanted to make up for it. They were also appreciative of what the government tried to do for us in various ways. So then they wanted to pay back in a way.
You graduated at the top of your law class at University of Florida. You were editor-in-chief of the Law Review. And you also wrote a piece about the rights of minorities to have access to legal education, which at the time, we're talking about the late 1940s, this is a period of Jim Crow, was probably a very challenging piece. What inspired you to do that?
Well, when I was in the Navy, I did a lot of independent reading, had an opportunity to do that as we floated around in some exercise somewhere or another. And I was exposed to a broader what's the word I want?
Spectrum?
A broader part of society. Started me thinking, and I became sensitive to the way that the Native Americans had been treated by some of us. I became sensitive and more thoughtful about the difficulties, to say the least, that the blacks had encountered. And I think just some of my values, my intuition, I think more than anything else, prompted me to want to do something to help improve the conditions of society.
In 1949, you joined the Florida Bar. You practiced law for a brief period of time in Plant City, but then you were notified that you'd been awarded a Rhodes Scholarship and you were off to Oxford, England, which I imagine had a profound influence on your life.
I didn't know what to do, so I went to see my prospective employers. One advised me to get to practicing law. The other advised me don't miss a chance to study abroad. I took his advice and then spent 3 years in England, which not only broadened my horizons, but made me more sensitive to other people, other walks of life. I began to care about it and think about it more than perhaps I had any other time.
In 1952, you returned from Oxford. You had some job offers in New York and Philadelphia, but you decided to take a teaching position, teaching law at the University of Florida.
Yes, I did. I wasn't quite sure whether I wanted to teach or practice law, and I wasn't quite sure whether I wanted to go to a place like New York City or Philadelphia, or come back to home ground. As it worked out, I liked practicing. I always liked teaching, so I would look over my shoulder the rest of my life at the teaching opportunity. I walked in to start my career in teaching, and as soon as I got there, they said, "Welcome, Reece. Now what we'd like for you to do, since you've had some teaching experience, is to go back and help them at Stetson Law School, because they've just moved the law school from DeLand to Gulfport, Florida, across the bay, and they're short of faculty. So will you please, on a part-time basis, go over there and help them out and teach?" So I did that for 5 years or so and enjoyed it immensely. But as it worked out, I didn't have any idea of what I wanted to concentrate in if I practiced. But as it worked out, I ended up doing trial and appellate work. And my trial calendar just got so heavy that I finally had to give up the Stetson experience at that point in time.
About 10 years after you joined Carlton Fields, Tampa Mayor Nick Nucio gave you a call and said he wanted you to consider becoming the attorney for the city of Tampa. And you've been teaching, you've been practicing, and now you're being invited to join the political governmental environment as the attorney for the city. And you said yes.
I worked for him, and then he was defeated by Dick Greco, and Dick Greco asked me, had been on the city council when I was representing Mayor Nucio, and he asked me to stay on and represent him, that is the city of Tampa, under his leadership. So I served a total of 7 or 8 years, I guess, under 2 different mayors. I think I'm the only one that ever had that experience, which pleases me to know it.
Also, during the 1960s, while you were working as a city attorney, you were also still working at Carlton Fields.
Oh, yes, I did.
Yeah, and you and a couple of other young lawyers at the time, Mitch Emanuel, Ed Cutler, really began to take over the reins of power at Carlton Fields and started to build it into the firm it has become.
Mitch was a tax lawyer. Cutler was very, very able, a sophisticated practitioner, prominent in the Jewish community. I had trial experience, and so the 3 of us with our particular specialties started working together to try to build a law firm that would be more dependent on the overall talent in the firm rather than upon 2 or 3 people who might be prominent in one way or another. We have grown steadily, and it's been a wonderful experience for me to be a part of that.
Back then you had about a handful of lawyers, and now you have...
Well, upwards to 400 now, but...
It's been a substantial growth over the years. Now, at the same time you were doing that, you were a city attorney, you were taking over some of the leadership of Carlton Fields, and you were also involved in the Hillsborough County Bar. You took over as president of the Hillsborough County Bar Association and started also working on providing legal services to the indigent.
You make me tired. Well, yes, I did run for president of the Hillsborough County Bar and was successful. It was there that I had my first introductions to legal aid and the legal needs of the poor. It's there that I got involved in committee activity that addressed some of the issues that were there. And it was something that I embraced and pursued the rest of my career, even to